In the furthest flung regions of the Imperium, a new empire is blossoming. Led by the Ethereals and united by their unshakable belief in the greater good, this young race has taken great strides towards establishing itself as a galactic power. With highly advanced technologies, an insatiable appetite for knowledge, and a welcoming hand to those who wish to join them, the Xenos of the Eastern Fringe launched their next sphere of expansion. They are 5 castes, one goal. They are the Tau. Today, we will be exploring the origins of the Tau and their empire before diving into the stories of the leaders and heroes who spearhead their warrior caste. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and welcome to 40k Stories. For almost all of human history, the Tau have been near irrelevant as a race. The blue-skinned aliens evolved on their homeworld, Tau with an apostrophe after the T for no reason, a long time after we did. In the 35th millennium, explorators of the Adeptus Mechanica stumbled across Ta'au, as I'm going to call it, and found the natives were at the level equivalent to our Stone Age, having just discovered the wonder of fire. Therefore, the Tau have evolved to a level beyond the Imperium and most other races on a technological level in less than 6,000 years, which is crazy to consider given the time it took for humanity to reach a lower technological quote-unquote ranking. This rapid evolution stems from a place called Phaeton and a battle that took place there toward the end of the 37th millennium, when the Ethereals first appeared. Before this, the Tau were divided into tribes that warred over resources. A tribe from the plains had been besieging Phaeton, supposedly a fortress city, bristling with cannons, when a pair of strange-looking Tau arrived, one travelling to each camp. Somehow, they persuaded the warring groups to come together and talk outside of the city. The pair, calling themselves the Ethereals, spoke of a universal goal for the Tau race and stressed that the various Tau tribes must be in harmony with one another in order to achieve this. An agreement was struck between the plains warriors and the city dwellers in an act repeated the world over as more Ethereals appeared to unite the Tau race behind the greater good. With the race at peace, the technological revolution began to accelerate at a frightening speed and is yet to abate. The legend of Phaeton raises the question as to the nature of the Ethereals and how they won over the Tau. Currently, the Imperium is scrambling for knowledge on the matter. One theory is that the Ethereals have some sort of psychic ability enabling them to control Tau around them, or that they use some unknown technology to do it. Perhaps more likely, given that no psychic power has been detected amongst the Ethereals, and the technology would have been far beyond any Tau of the time to make, is that the Ethereals use some form of pheromone to control the Tau. An Ordo-Xenos study into a captured Ethereal found potential evidence of this, but no such system was ever identified, and so we still cannot know how the Ethereals were, and still are, able to command the Tau so imperviously. Tau society is separated into 5 castes, including the Ethereals themselves. They are named after the elements, and fulfill very different roles, all while serving the overarching greater good. The Earth caste are the artisans, scientists, and labourers of the Tau, responsible for almost every piece of technology in both the Tau armory and society in general. Physically short and stout, members of the Earth caste are poor fighters. The Air caste are the pilots and messengers, many of whom are either unable to, or simply refuse to, set foot on a planet due to their skeletons no longer functioning in the higher gravity of planets compared to space stations or starships. This makes them extremely tall and slender, with hollow bones, though they have devolved from the wing-like membranes they used to have, when they would glide on air currents, pre-Phaeton. The water caste have slightly more bulk than the air caste and are slightly shorter, but are able to work on regular planets, and possess a serenity second only to the Ethereals and an unparalleled knowledge of the other races in the galaxy. Their study is not of war, but of diplomacy, and they function as negotiators, trying to win worlds over to the greater good without resorting to violence. When the water caste fails, or if the water caste fails, it will fall to the fire caste to take the world by force. The fire caste are the bulkiest of the Tau in terms of muscle, with heights similar to humans, if not slightly shorter, though compared to actual humans, they are generally physically weak. Every Tau is identified, in terms of name, by a series of conventions based on rank, caste, homeworld, and monikers, amongst other things. A good example is Commander Farsight, whose official name is Chasso Viola Chauva Caius, or Case, Montier. This denotes that he is a member of the fire caste by the Chasse. Earth, water, air caste, and ethereals are denoted by Theo, Paul, Cor, and Aun, respectively, and O is his rank of commander. Known ranks are Sal, La, Oui, Vr, L, and O, in ascending order, though there are some special ones such as Nel. Viola is his homeworld, whilst Chauva, Caius, and Montier are monikers, meaning far-sighted, skilled, and blooded, i.e. a veteran of many battles, respectively. This makes some tales' names ridiculously long, but it does help to identify them and also remove a level of individuality, as a basic fire warrior of, let's say, Viola would simply be Shasla, Viola, something. They do have names, but they get replaced by their titles as they progress through the ranks. With the Tau's history and social structure established, we will now explore the history of notable individuals from the Tau's short but dynamic history. The longest and most developed tale is that of the aforementioned Commander Farsight. Born on the world of Viola, the fire warrior named Sho was always destined for greatness. He rose through the ranks as fast as was possible for a Tau, training under the legendary Commander Puretide before leading his first Hunter Cadre, a standard Tau combat formation, to war against the Orcs on Arkanasha. Here he learned much of the Greenskins, penned in the now legendary Book of the Beast. He actively encouraged a more close-range style of warfare he developed himself, known as the Way of the Short Blade, alongside a divide-and-conquer approach known as the Way of the Broken Sword. He became the new hero replacing Puretide on Delith for the Empire, when the Tau first fought against the Imperium of Man in a devastating war following expansion across the Damocles Gulf. Farsight then led the retaking of the worlds lost to the humans, known to the Tau as Gay La, where La denotes a basic warrior, before engaging the Orcs of War Grog Ironteeth. Oshova underestimated the war chief massively, almost losing the newly reclaimed worlds and his own life, before finally defeating the Orcs by turning the elements of the 4 planets against them. He was among the first Tau to encounter demons and the forces of chaos in general, losing all of the ethereals who had accompanied his expedition on the dead world of Arthas Moloch, though he did recover his now signature weapon, the Dawnblade, during the same conflict. The Dawnblade is, we think, a Catan sword or Necrontyr sword with a chronophagic alloy, allowing it to steal the life force of the ones it kills and transfer it to the wielder. Reeling from the implications of what he had seen and learned of Arthas Moloch, i.e. the fact that the warp exists, Farsight went into hiding, whilst his warriors established an ethereal-free colony on their new worlds, known as the Farsight Enclaves, Violos, Tinekla, Salache, and Lubgral. The only ethereal welcome is Aun'shi, who we will discuss later. Farsight then returned many decades or perhaps centuries later to free his adopted home Violos, son of Viola in Tau language, from the invading Tyranids of Hive Fleet Gorgon, destroying the hive ships above thanks to a virus developed by his Earthcast friend Ovesa. He now leads the Enclaves again, accompanied to war by the rest of the 8, the battlesuit pilots, including Ovesa, even though he's from the wrong cast, who held out on Violos to ensure the virus was developed. They are Farsight, Commander Bravestorm, Shavastos, Sub-Commander Torchstar, Ovesa, Shasfra Oblotine 9-0, Commander Arakon, who led the Enclaves whilst Farsight was away, and Commander Brightsword. Farsight has been back once to the Tau Empire since this time, saving his old training partner turned successor Commander Shadowsun, more on her later, from Imperial retribution on Agralan, known to the Tau as Mugulath Bay. The reception was frosty, to say the least, for he was seen by the Empire as a traitor to the greater good, and so he had to lead his troops away quickly following the conflict, lest they be censured by the ethereal leadership, despite the fact that, well, he saved them. He now pilots his distinctive Crimson Crisis battlesuit, wielding the Dawnblade as he leads the Mont Ka, or Killing Blow. His tale is far longer and far more epic than could possibly be discussed here, so I'll put a link in the description to the full story if you wish to hear it and don't have the Farsight Enclave supplement available to read. As a massive fan of Farsight who started an army based on him solely because of this lore, I can assure you it's a legend well worth hearing. As Aun'va embodies the Mont Ka, Shasera embodies the Cao Yon, the patient hunter, the second primary fighting style adopted by Tau commanders. Shasera, best known today as Commander Shadowsun, was another prodigy of the Fire Caste who trained on Mount Kanji under Commander Puretide, hero of the second sphere expansion and probably the smartest Tau who ever lived. Shasera was younger than Farsight, and he consistently outscored her in the simulations of Puretide, but Shasera was never far behind her training partner and rival-in-chief. In truth, they did not directly compete, for the paths they walked were very different. The highly aggressive Farsight sought to become master of Mont Ka, whilst the cold and efficient Shadowsun was the mistress of Cao Yon. The third warrior present, O'Case, was a monad, a soloist, who could master any situation with the tools to hand. The two, Shasera and Shova, then worked together on Delith to stop the human invaders. Together is possibly a strong word. To be honest, Shadowsun upstaged Farsight's command briefing and left a trail of ruined Imperial tanks behind her without communicating to her fellow commander so much as once. The two worked more closely towards the end, with Shadowsun's cadres baiting out the Imperials into one of Farsight's now legendary counter-assaults. Commander Puretide died soon after, and whilst his knowledge was stored in an AI, the new Ethereal Supreme Aun'va decided to entomb some of his greatest students in stasis, so as Puretide could be further preserved in case the AI capture failed. Shasera and O'Case were frozen in this manner, whilst Shova was left to lead the reclamation of the Damocles Gulf and then eventually quote-unquote go rogue. At the time, Shova was assumed dead by the wider empire, and only later did his apparent betrayal filter back to the Ethereal High Council. Shasera was thawed out to tackle an Orc invasion it says centuries later, earning her nickname/moniker of Shadowsun for her decisive attacks on the Greenskins, which took place during an eclipse. She was promoted to Supreme Commander when the Third Sphere expansion was launched by Aun'va, but before her first speech, the Ethereal Supreme talked to her alone. What was said is actually unknown, but in response Shadowsun travelled to Montir, the training dome at which Farsight was trained as a youth on Viola. Piloting her new experimental XV-22 stealth battlesuit, she destroyed the statue of Shova there, the only one left standing within the Empire as a result of the ethereal response to Farsight's supposed abandonment of the greater good. Since then, Shadowsun has led the Tau to a string of victories, trying to cover over the stain left by Farsight. Ironically, however, she found herself debted to Shova, as the forces of the Enclaves came to help defend the newly taken Mugalath Bay. The Imperials still did win, but it is likely it would have been a total rout without the Enclaves. Grateful to her old partner for his aid, and without the Ethereals guiding her words following the events of the battle, Shadowsun was wounded during the assault and Aun'va was dead, Shasera told Shova that she had been tasked with hunting down and capturing him. This cast doubt on what would happen should their paths cross in more peaceful times, i.e. one not saving the other from total annihilation. It's always been assumed to this point that the two would simply fight to the death, as Farsight would never want himself or his forces to return to the Empire and the control of the Ethereals. But it may be possible that the olive branch extended by Shadowsun means that the students of Puretide could forge an alliance whilst maintaining the sovereignty of the Enclaves. Aun'va, the most recent Ethereal Supreme, the Master of the Undying Spirit, Space Pope. Whatever you wish to call him, Aun'va has had a massive impact on the recent history of the Tau. He ascended to Ethereal Supreme following the death of the previous one, Aun'wa, sometime after Farsight's expedition was launched across the Damocles Gulf. He was high-ranking when the expedition began, but the exact timing of his promotion may be before or after the events of Arthas Moloch. He was passionate and driven, always wishing to see the Tau and the greater good advance. It was he who organised both the Farsight expedition and the internment of Shasera and O'Case into stasis. He was also responsible for destroying the legend he'd built. Aun'va had used the propaganda machine of the Watercast to portray Farsight as the greatest of the Firecast, hero of the entire Empire, but was forced to do a 180 following the events of the battle between Chaos and Shova. Every reference to Farsight was destroyed. save the statue on Viola later destroyed by Shadow Sun, which is Farsight's home. Those who spoke of the now renegade commander suddenly went missing, never to be seen again, especially if they were vocal supporters. Aun'va was a master politician and orator. It is said no order he gave was ever refused, and his mere presence, or the knowledge of him being on-world, could drive the Tau to victory despite hopeless odds, even more so than in the presence of other ethereals. And yet, Aun'va, according to the very most recent canon, is now dead. Seemingly, he was caught on Mugalath Bay during the aforementioned Imperial counter-invasion and cornered by Kilex's assassin, who proceeded to kill him in the least swift and painless way it knew how. Suffice to say, the Ethereal Supreme suffered immeasurably. This leaves the Tau without a leader amongst the Ethereals, and whilst one will be elected from amongst their ranks, they don't have one right now. This potentially puts Commander Shadow Sun into a position of even greater import than she held as Supreme Commander at the Firecast, and could help with thawing the relationship with Farsight, with the main instigator of the problem being dead. As far as replacements go, there are very few other Ethereals who are explicitly named in the lore, and none of those are presently members of the Ethereal High Council to my knowledge. However, there is one other well-known Ethereal, Aun'shi. Aun'shi is an Ethereal of Viola, and though he is seen as a good-luck charm by the Firecast, he does not share the hot-bloodedness of the others who come from the Empire's most militant world. He longs for peace, but is seemingly unable to escape from the theatre of war. Aun'shi is old by Ethereal standards, having now passed the age at which an Ethereal can choose to retire, but actions just before he reached this age ensured he'd never have that opportunity. He was inspecting a new colony known as Keltir in order to ensure it was fully prepared, whilst in the village of Feovash, possibly an Earthcast village given the name, Aun'shi and his forces were surrounded by what remained of the orcs on Keltir that had been whittled down by the Tal since the Ethereal's arrival. The Firecast commander, Ashas Vra, was slain by the warboss of the orcs, and in response Aun'shi took command, slicing the boss apart with his ceremonial honor blade and steadying the line. The Tau held, but were inexorably driven back by the Greenskins until only a few remained, less than 50 fire warriors and then Aun'shi himself. As they prepared to make their final stand, a heavily armoured relief force came and saved Feovash from being overrun. Rather than lead the survivors in a counter-assault, Aun'shi stood guard over them and the ethereal shrine they had been defending, his honour blade covered in alien blood and ichor. When word came back to Aun'va and the Ethereal Council, they decided that such a hero could not be allowed to simply disappear into retirement. Instead, Aun'shi remained on active duty in the Third Sphere expansion, and is still seen as good fortune for the fire warriors he accompanies. His current whereabouts are slightly hazy, as he is believed to be on an expedition to the Farsight enclaves in order to return them to the Empire. As the only ethereal even permitted within the enclaves, and with the combat style that Farsight himself adapted for battlesuit use, it stands to reason that the aged wonder may well stand a shred of a chance of convincing Oshova to return, especially with Aun'va out of the picture and Shadow Sun seemingly willing to mellow relations between the students of Puretide. There are two more famous Tau of the Firecast to discuss, but unlike the legendary commanders, they have not taken the traditional route to heroism like Oshova or Oshasera. The first is Sub-Commander L. Miyamoto, better known as Darkstrider. Miyamoto progressed to Shasui, as is tradition for all Tau Fire Warriors who can survive for 5 years on the line, but he refused the usual honour of battlesuit command, meaning he never piloted an XV-8 or even an XV-25 stealth suit. Instead, he chose to remain with the Pathfinder teams he'd served with for the previous years before taking the Trial by Fire, which is the means by which a Tau can advance to a new rank. He's since gone on to gain a reputation as a hero who can escape almost any situation, no matter how dangerous, and he still, despite being only one rank between the highest of commanders, will not pilot a battlesuit. Many commanders dislike him for being borderline insubordinate, but Shadow Sun admires his initiative and bravery, and has gone on record to say she enjoys working with him. Some pretty famous backing, if I say so myself. The second is Shasla Tao Shang, well, Tao because it's got the apostrophes from the planet of Tao, or Longstrike. Shang always showed a natural aptitude for the art of vehicle piloting, especially for the Hammerhead gunship, and this was proven to all on the planet of Taros. His bondmates, the equivalent to squad mates amongst the Tau tank commanders, were all slain in battle by tank convoys of the Imperial Guard, who outnumbered them 6 to 1 at least, but Shang fought on with unerring accuracy. He bullseyed tank after tank, and reportedly scored a killing headshot on a Warhound Titan, though the canonicity of this is disputed. With his legend established and the Imperials repulsed by an air assault, Longstrike was selected to field test the newly developed XV-02 pilot battlesuit, which removes the need for additional crew by allowing the pilot to interface directly with his hammerhead. This allows Longstrike to better aid the cadres on the ground with supporting fire, which is why his hammerhead in-game has the supporting fire rule, though he refuses to share in any Talisera or bonding knife rituals with them due to the deaths of his original bondmates on Taros. So end the Tales of the Tau, at least for now. With the Third Sphere expansion continuing apace and the expeditions of the Farsight enclaves ongoing, it is likely that the heroes we've seen today have many more chapters to add to their stories. Well, except Aun'va, he's dead. Whilst new legends will emerge alongside them. I hope you've enjoyed our trip out to the Eastern Fringe over the past couple of weeks, and that your view on those who fight for the greater good isn't so jaded by jump shoot jump plasma spam anymore. Next time on 40k Stories, we're going to head back to Imperial space, but on the way we're going to take a whistle-stop tour of the kingdoms of the ruinous powers. Hold on to your sanity and power up your Gellerfield. We're going into the warp. I hope you can join me for that next week. My name is Michael for Tactica Imperialis, and I'll see you all again. Goodbye.